to the president at the Baltimore Ravens of the National Football League. Welcome, Adam.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Well, I hope it's a happy Friday. uh, um, so we like to start the program in the same way every time, which is actually tell us what your job is. I just spit out a title, but what's the job description? What is it? What's your day to day, which I'm sure is different every day, but what kind of things do you do? And also, what's your path? How did you end up working in the front office of a National Football League franchise?
Well, I'll start with the second piece, just from a chronology standpoint. I started off as a young kid in Baltimore, and I had always wanted to work in sports. I thought that sports was a really special, amazing space, where even before working, if you're just sort of a kid at a park playing sports, if you're a ball hog, for example, people are going to point that out. If you make an amazing play, people are going to point that out. It's where you learn how to sweat, how to compete. And I always wanted to be around sports and was blessed with the opportunity to be a legal intern for the Minnesota Vikings during law school at the University of Pennsylvania. I struck up a really powerful relationship with the then chief operating officer uh, of the Minnesota Vikings, Kevin Warren, who then became the commissioner of the Big Ten Conference and now, of course, is the president and CEO of the Chicago Bears. And we just had a great relationship in Minnesota. I worked really hard as a legal intern and then went to go work in capital markets at Simpson Thatcher. When Kevin left the Vikings to go to the Big Ten, he really changed my career and took me on in a senior leadership position at the Big Ten Conference and really escalated, I guess, my journey in sports. Worked with him for a bunch of years at the Big Ten and then found myself back in the NFL with the Ravens. So, two purple colored football teams for me, but definitely an extra special piece working for a team that you grew up rooting for. And Hanukkah presents that my mom gave me in middle school and high school now fit perfectly in this office. And that's just a really special piece that exists. In terms of day to day and what I do, I assist the president in running all the business operations of the team. Football is typically split up in a variety of ways. There's the football side of the house, which a lot of people see, that's calling plays and scouting players. And then, of course, football, like everything else, is a big business. There are television opportunities, sponsorship pieces, strategic planning, financial considerations, legal considerations, practice facility renovations. M&T Bank, our wonderful, incredible partner, M&T Bank, naming our stadium and our incredible venue at the bank, renovations that are going on there, and the amount of close to $600 million. So there's never a day that's free, and we are just every day trying to win football games, give back to our community, and make this a great place for our employees.
Well, I like the sound of that job because you can never get bored because you've got your hands in lots of pies. But there's a big issue going on in the NFL right now that just happened, which is the entrance of equity into the National Football League. Are you seeing any of that action going on in your franchise?
I think the Ravens are a very patient organization. They're not ones to sort of just jump in right away, and I don't think that's necessarily the primary concern right now. Our owner, who has been the owner for quite some time now, when he began as minority owner and then eventually purchased the team from Art Modell, I think his focus really solely remains on trying to win a championship. And the Ravens, as you know, have been really close the last couple of years. 2 years ago, the Ravens hosted the first AFC championship game ever in Baltimore, defeated by the Chiefs 17-10. And last year, a heartbreaking loss, almost a tie at the 2-point conversion in Buffalo to a really great football team. And I think we're back. I think we're stronger and better than ever. And I think our ownership group remains focused on winning football and a little bit less probably in the equity of the team at this current moment and juncture.
I know that you're now in professional sports, but we've seen so many changes in the collegiate world. And we just had a big decision. Judge Wilkin approved the House settlement, and immediately appeals were filed. It's a little bit different, but as part of that change in college sports, are you seeing any difference in the rookie classes that are coming into the league?
I have a great relationship with our GM, and I think Eric has publicly spoken about how the folks that come in are a little bit more business minded, to your point, because they understand it more. It used to be that this big pool of money that folks would say would be dropped on a population that didn't necessarily have all that money, and we're now getting it for the first time in the National Football League. That isn't the case. A lot of our high round draft picks and even later round draft picks have robust NIL packages, which for those who are not familiar means that they're getting paid for their name, image, and likeness. And there are collectives that are paying them, and there are all sorts of mechanisms in which they can earn money. And there's no question that we're seeing a business in college sports, and especially with the madness of the transfer portal. You'll hear coaches, and I speak often with former coaches that I still maintain a great relationship with, that talk about it's more difficult to keep your team together than to recruit new players. You're literally trying to re-recruit your player as he's on the team. And we've seen drama, from the top to the bottom, from schools like Maryland to schools like Florida. I mean, you see it all across the board in college sports. But I do think one of these silver linings that comes through is you're getting folks and kids, primarily ages 17 to 23 when they're in college, coming up to the pro ranks a little more understanding what it means to have an agent, what it means to take care of yourself, what it means to have a bank account. And I think that's ultimately a good thing. You're getting more mature players that can come into the league.
Part of what's happening in college, obviously, is conference realignment, and the Power Five is now down to the Power Four. And we've had conversations that seem to be going on strongly between Mr. Sankey and Mr. Petiti about their giant conferences. Do you think that with the money that's flowing into college sports now, and now the ability, assuming that the appeals are somehow limited and universities are actually directly paying the athletes for their name, image, and likeness rights, do you think that it becomes more of a almost a minor league, more so than it's ever been, given the amount of money that's pouring into college sports?
I don't see it as any more of a minor league than it's already been. I think when you think about the tape and you think about the availability of the games and the way scouts are literally scouring over film, I think that's always been the case. I don't know that the influx of money changes that. I think the advent of the internet has changed everything. You can now, there is no prospect anywhere else that you haven't heard of. They all exist. You might rate them differently. I don't know that money changes that. I think college sports just remains sort of a wild, wild west right now. And I think loyalty matters a lot when you look at players. I know the Ravens are looking at very specific players. Here it really is a whole package. I remember when I was applying to law school, they always use the word holistic. We're looking holistically at it, but everybody's like, does that just mean your index score, like what you got on the LSAT and your GPA? And I like to believe that the Ravens aren't just looking at metrics and stats. Of course, there is the combine, and of course, there is tape, but I know the Ravens take interviews very seriously. They want to know about people's backgrounds and their likes, their dislikes, their interests, what their family life is like. They want to make sure that you're a fit, that when you come to Baltimore, this is a good place for you, because people always succeed when they're successful. What happens when you tear your ACL? How are you going to behave in that way? What happens when you lose your starting spot? What happens when you don't meet a requirement to get the bonus you were hoping for? So you can sort of weed out certain characters, and I think the Ravens work really hard to find players that are mature but that will also fit in to the culture. We have a saying here called play like a Raven. And I don't know that every football team has that character where you can say this is what it's like, but there are some teams in the NFL where you know what it means to be a Raven, and that usually means you're tough as nails. You're willing to play for the team, defensive minded, and I think we continue to work hard. I don't know that conference realignment will change that too much. It will cause a lot of other issues in the college space, but I don't know that it changes the way we view it sort of as a minor league or not.
Yeah, one of the words you used was loyalty, and my question for you is, given the transfer portal and the number of high-profile athletes that seem to get an extra year or maybe an extra 2 years, and they flip schools and leave schools, how does that play into the evaluation of talent when you're thinking about loyalty?
I think it does. You'd have to probably ask our scouting team more on that, but I do think watching a player stay where they are, you look at a player like Zay Flowers on the Ravens, who very under recruited as a high schooler. Still amazing to me that you can be under recruited when you're that good and that talented and that shifty. I believe his only Division I scholarship offer was Boston College. And I mean, there's no question. You can talk to him that after his first year at Boston College, he had offers at Alabama and Florida and Texas and Ohio State and Michigan. Sorry, excuse me, the Ohio State University. And he stayed at Boston College, and I have no doubt that they intensified their NIL package, but I'm sure there was part of him that felt this was the right space. And Zay is a kid from Florida, so I don't know that Boston was his first choice when he was looking at universities to attend, but he felt like that was a place he wanted to be. You look at someone like Ronnie Stanley, our left tackle this summer, the number one free agent on ESPN's list of free agents, a very small left tackle market. The draft was not known to have a ton of left tackles. And Ronnie really prioritized staying with the Ravens. I'll let folks do their own research on, if he gave us a break or not. I'm not to speak to that. I don't know the answer to that, but it certainly looked like there were other opportunities where he could have hit free agency and maybe squeezed each penny. But I think Ronnie said to himself, I want to play left tackle for the Baltimore Ravens. I want to block for Lamar Jackson. I want to mentor Roger Rosengarten on the right side of the line, who was a rookie last year, who I helped develop. I want to be with Tyler Linderbaum, our Pro Bowl center. How do you create that culture? How do you nurture that type of behavior? You got to run a great organization. And that means you got to have a great nutritionist. You got to have a great staff that says if you're hurt, you shouldn't play. You got to have a great coach that says this is how you're going to get better and I'm going to get you a bigger contract. You got to have a group that takes care of your spouse and your family. And if you're having a real estate issue, you come to the team and say, I'm having trouble finding an apartment. Can someone help me? I mean, those are the type of things that I think go under the radar that teams can provide to players that develop a culture that allows players to want to stay and play for the team, that I don't think all teams are created equal in that way. Even if you take a look at weight rooms or what the coaching staff looks like or what the training staff looks like or how many doctors are on a team, if you pay close attention where teams are investing money and resources, you'll see the Ravens are at the top of investing in players, making sure the nutrition is perfect. All that kind of stuff plays a major factor in a player wanting to be there. And that goes back to what you were talking about with college, because that we are competing with, because these college universities are building incredible practice facilities. I mean, state of the art. Some of these places are better than professional places. So that's where you don't want a kid coming from a college and saying, holy crap, my gym was better in college than it is in the pros. You certainly don't want that. So we take that very seriously. We do site visits of all sorts of different practice facilities and stadiums of really not just exclusive to football, which probably won't surprise you. We look at soccer stadiums in London. We look at a lot of different places to see how can we make sure that our experience is terrific and first class and make sure that players that come with the Ravens leave, stay, whenever they're here to say, this is a great place to work because it is a job and we take that really seriously.
When you're talking about your job, you mentioned that you're involved in the strategic planning elements of it. And that seems to be really the holistic nature of running any kind of business is where are we going? What's our mission? How are we going to get there? In Baltimore, is there any unique considerations you have, whether it's with respect to your practice facilities, or is it more about what it means to be a Baltimore Raven?
I think for us, when you think about strategic planning, we think a lot about fandom. We want to make sure we're always creating new fans. And it's no surprise to you and probably no surprise to many people that Baltimore is a really small market. We lost the Baltimore Bullets to Washington, where they became the Washington Wizards. We share the complex with the wonderful Baltimore Orioles, who have been highly successful in the last few years, struggling right now a little bit, but I'm sure they'll turn it around. And we love them and have a great relationship with them. And they have new ownership with David Rubenstein, and that's been a terrific piece. And their president, Katie Griggs, is a fabulous person and really doing great things in Baltimore, so we're excited. We now share a food and beverage vendor with them, which has a lot of synergy. That's Levy, and we're excited about that. But we're always kind of thinking about how do we create new fans and make sure people can see us and appreciate us. But there's no question we have a lot of competition. You have the Washington Commanders, which are down the block, and they're building a new stadium with new ownership group under Josh Harris. Philadelphia is not far away, and they just won a Super Bowl. Pains me to say it, but it's true. And the New York Jets and New York Giants. I mean, if you're on the SLA from Baltimore Penn Station to New York Penn Station, now the fancy Moynihan Hall, I mean, that's 2 hours and 10 minutes. So you are really competing with a lot of things. Maryland has 0 Fortune 500 companies, so it's not a particularly wealthy state. And we're trying to make sure that when the Ravens are successful or unsuccessful on the field, that fans feel really connected. Now, since 1996, there is no question when the Ravens have come to town, there has been an unprecedented amount of success in this building. And that is due to the legendary work of Art Modell, David Modell, Steve Bisciotti, our current owner, Sashi Brown, my boss, the president, Eric DaCosta, Ozzie Newsome. I mean, these guys are just legends in the game, and they have kept a level of consistency that is unprecedented. But I think what we like to think about is there will be a rainy day. I hope it's not for 50 years. I hope it's not for 100 years. But there will come a time where the Ravens will struggle. And maybe there will be a period of 4 or 5 years we don't make the playoffs, which has never happened, which again, in a salary cap era, is nearly impossible. Cannot give enough credit to Eric and Ozzy and George Kokinis and that whole team over there. But if that does happen, how do you make sure M&T Bank is still full even if the team is struggling? How do you make sure you're still hosting live concerts? How do you make sure there's still a great cash flow and it still means something in the community to be a Baltimore Raven, irrespective of the success on the field? On-field success, most important. Off-field success, tertiary, but still something we're focused on. We want to make sure that when people come into M&T Bank, they say, this is an amazing experience. You see that with what the Savannah Bananas are doing. I mean, what the heck is going on over there? I mean, Jesse's selling out anything and everything, and he has capitalized on this fan-first, friendly environment, great ingress and egress, awesome on the TV, sick on the culinary and all that kind of stuff, and he's crushed it. So we look closely at that. Technology's helping with that a lot too. It's not a good place to be in a game if you can't find a bathroom. You know, Steve Ballmer capitalized that by adding all those bathrooms in his new stadium. So to me, it's about how do we create an environment that my mom wants to go to, my cousin wants to go to, my 6-year-old nephew wants to go to, everybody's enjoying it, and the product on the field is a terrific product. And the football guys are making sure we have a great football product. We want to make sure we got a great business product.
Which is a great area to talk about briefly, which you've sort of alluded to, which is fan experience. There's a lot of elements in a professional team of any sort, but in the NFL, you got one game a week, you got 17 games, you got 8 or 9 home games, and like you said, you want to make sure that people say, God, this was great, where families are going to save up to maybe get to their one game a year. How do you view that fan experience, and what are all the elements and considerations that you have to add? Because you got the football guys building out, with one of the greatest players I've ever seen at
Yes.
quarterback, really strong team, a great tight end who got pillared for, he's leave him alone. He had a great season.
He had a great season. He's a great player, and he's a fantastic human.
Yeah, and so you've got all that's going on, and you're building a great football team. You got one of the great coaches ever. All of that stuff is really good, but we're in a world now where people want more. They want more than just a good football team. They want a good experience. How do you sort of analyze what people want? Do you do surveys? How does that process work out? Because that seems to be the entertainment value, the experience of bringing your family to a game is really a part of what really drives the success of these NFL franchises. And how do you guys evaluate all of that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think the key word is entertainment and ensuring that people are enjoying the game. And then you just really break down, like you said, through surveys and engagement with the community, well, what matters? So a big one is safety. Baltimore City has had safety issues. There's no question about that. It has been one of the most dangerous cities in America. Well, we've partnered with Mayor Brandon Scott, and homicides are at the lowest point they've ever been in downtown Baltimore. That's a big deal. Now people can feel safer. If you have illegal vendors selling fake merchandise and fake autographs right outside your stadium, that's a problem because people don't feel safe and they feel like they can get ripped off. If the food quality is poor, if the bathrooms aren't clean, if it takes you 2 hours to get home after a game, is that fun to sit in traffic and listen to the radio? So all of these different factors are really, really important. Parking is a huge one, as you can imagine. It's a big situation that we think about all the time. In-game giveaways, weather we can't control, but can we make it more fun? Let's say we know it's going to pour and we think attendance is going to have a couple no-shows. Can we give away free Super Bowl tickets to incentivize people to come in? Are there in-game activations? Can we bring in a really cool performer at halftime? All of these different facets, and I cannot stress that you hit the nail on the head of entertainment are so important because to your point, you are now competing with an 80-inch TV that anyone can pick up on Amazon that can be delivered the next day, that can be in crystal clear fashion. You can have your mom making the greatest food in the other room, your mom's grilling, your dad's cooking something else, baking cookies, who knows what he's doing. You bring all your friends and family over. It's cheaper. You buy your favorite foods. You turn on the game. You can pause the game. You can fast forward. You can go back. You can look at a highlight. You can watch Twitter. We got to make sure that people feel that when they're in game, this experience puts everything else to shame. And people want to say, I was there that week. Can you do something special that you can only get in a game? A certain t-shirt that maybe you can print out a play that's happening live, that you can maybe print at a Fanatic shop on site, that you can go home with your name on it, or something very personal to the game. And we're working hard to do that. We're working really hard that if you're a PSL holder, can we get you on the field before a game within 5 or 6 years where you can take a picture on the field with your family? Can we get you, on the field to meet some of the practice squad players, perhaps? Like there's so many small things that matter. Something that my colleague Rich Tamayo does so well is if you're at the Ravens Stadium and there's something really special happening for you, a big birthday or a big anniversary, you can email the Ravens and someone from Guest Experience will find you in the stadium in the middle of the game and present you with a box of items. It could be a t-shirt and a pair of sunglasses. It has your name on it with a certificate. It's not about if it's an Ed Reed signed jersey or a Ray Lewis signed jersey. It's about you feeling like you matter to the team. And I think everything surrounding our ability to make people feel like they're part of the Raven culture, that's going to matter to us. So again, entertainment is the key there.
Well, part of entertainment.
I can't make sure, to your point, if Lamar Jackson's going to score or not. I think he is, but I can't guarantee that we're going to win. We have to control what we can control, and I think the coaching staff would tell you that too.
So you've talked about the fan experience, but the fan experience extends beyond game day. Keeping them engaged in a variety of ways. And then we all know that the game rights are held by the league and distributed among the various media partners. But there's local engagement through media, coaches, shows, the variety of things. How are you reaching out to the fans in your local media?
For us, we're trying to do everything we can to be part of the community, and I think also brand with other statewide initiatives. We recently just branded really nicely with the Preakness Stakes, of course, the second in the Triple Crown with in horse racing. And what we can do there, not only with TV, but is to really incorporate our band, which is one of the longest growing bands. They called it the Band That Never Died, which is a plug for a great 30 under 30, about a band that just kept going after the Baltimore Colts fled to Indianapolis in the middle of the night. We have a great cheer squad. We obviously have Poe. We did retire Edgar and Allen, but we still have Poe, the mascot. And we're just trying really hard to be involved in people's community events. We obviously have, big names and big players and big, bold executives that are willing to speak at various commencements and various different events within the community. We just partnered as a staff. We just went to Green Street Academy, which is a local school where the entire staff did a day of volunteer service. I think 96% of the staff participated in that, building mosaics and mulching and getting dirty in the hot sun. We brought some players to that as well. So I think, again, for a team like Baltimore, where you're really entrenched in the community, and I say this with pride, the Ravens are the best brand in town. It's not close. Every Friday, my father has a 5-person accounting firm. 3 of them don't watch football. Everybody wears purple. It's called Purple Friday. I'm not going to mention any team names, but I promise you, if you're in New York City, people are not wearing team colors for teams in that city on a Friday because there's Broadway and Michelin star restaurants and God knows what else exists in New York City. And I love New York City. I lived there for 10 years. It's an incredible city, and I love that place. And I love those 2 teams. But the reality is, I always think of the Ravens almost as a college football team in that way. Because when you go to Lincoln, Nebraska on Saturday, you know that game's sold out because they have the nation's longest sellout streak. And you know within 2 seconds, someone's going to offer you a runza, which I can't eat because I'm kosher, but it's some sort of meat pocket. And it is just something that they rave about, and they're going to offer it to you, and it's in different flavors. And that's what you do in Lincoln, Nebraska on Saturday. And here in Baltimore, we want to make sure that wherever you are, the Ravens are the main event on Sundays, and now Thursdays, and Mondays, and Wednesdays.
And sometimes Tuesdays and Fridays.
God knows where else the NFL will put a game. But I was proud to be at the Beyonce Bowl concert where the Ravens were victorious against the Texans. And both the game and Beyonce were very impressive that day on Christmas.
Well, that's, another thing to consider is not just the travel element, but the NFL seems to be very interested in expanding the game internationally. League's season's going to start with a game in Brazil. I think there's games scheduled for Germany and London coming up. How does your team react to when you get the call from the NFL that says you get the international game this year? What do you have to do, because it's a significant undertaking, just the travel part. I'm sure there's visa issues, so many moving parts internationally, plus just the logistics of keeping players in their normal routine, even though you're traveling. And you're lucky because you only have to travel 6, 7 hours for some of these international games. West Coast teams could be an 11 or 12 hour trip.
I think again, I think you're hitting all the major points, but the reality is that we understand that a lot of the money comes from television contracts. I'm no stranger to that, as being, involved in the deal that obviously the Big Ten did with CBS, NBC, and Fox and Peacock. We get that that's a big piece, and there's a share amongst all of the teams. So we all rise together, and there's no question that forming a global audience, which with more eyeballs and more viewership, means increased television sales, which is good for the league, certainly good for the owners, and good for the teams, good for the players, good for everybody, good for exposure, and it's always great to share in that. At the same time, I think to your point, players, coaches, staff like consistency. I think Sunday at 1 is a beautiful thing that teams really enjoy. It's very hard to play Thursday and then a following Sunday and all of those in between. It's hard, although it's fun to be in prime time. I know players and coaches alike enjoy that. I know people have different strategies. I remember the Ravens lost in London because there's really two strategies when you travel, from what I understand. You can either go right before and hope you'll just go right past the jet lag, like let's say a game's on a Saturday or a Sunday, like you just fly on a Thursday, Friday, or you try and go like a week and a half early, which is what we did last time, and you try and acclimate with a new piece and get accustomed to the weather and everything that's happening out there. So I think this time, simply because we lost last time doing it the other way, we did do about a week and a half to London, but it's like a full-time job trying to plan a trip across the country to a new place. I think the business staff is up for it, and we're happy to do it. We are not on that list this year, which is nice. We're also not on Christmas this year, which is nice. When you're popular and you're very talented, the league wants to put you in primetime matchups. So that has, again, it's good and bad. You'd rather have it this way than the other way, but we are happy to not be on Christmas this year. We are hosting a Thanksgiving game, which will be exciting against the Bengals, but there's no question that traveling across to other countries is something the league is prioritizing. We recently actually partnered and opted into the program from a marketing perspective with UK. So that's one of our wonderful hubs where we have a lot of fans, and we're going to keep leaning into that. And I think the NFL is interested in really zeroing in on certain fan bases with certain countries, and we're happy to be part of that.
Yeah, the NFL did sort of set up this system where it's almost like a sales deal where you get territories, and
Yes.
you're the Ravens, so you get this territory, and the Rams get this territory. Was that an owners meeting agreement on who got what territories?
I candidly don't know exactly how that went down. I know that a lot of it was really based on where folks had existing fans or where they felt like they could continue to be. I'm sure it also was consideration with travel and where people wanted to just keep investing. So I think London just made sense for us, but I don't know if there was a global meeting about that. But I know it's been in the works for a while, and teams have definitely opted in at different times. It wasn't like all 32 teams opted in at the same time. It was sort of a slow roll. And like I said, the Ravens are a very patient organization. I think that's the word you'll always see even after an NFL draft. It's like, how did Malachi Starks fall to the Ravens? They're so patient by waiting for the players they want. So I think that's pretty much how we are across the board. So I don't think we were one of the first teams to dive into the international program, but I know we're happy to be there now, and I know the organization's really, really excited about it.
Well, I think this has been really interesting, getting a perspective on sort of what goes on in running a football team. I think most of the audience, even the experienced people in sports, unless you've been in media or in a team, don't really understand how many moving parts there are that are completely outside of X's and O's, as they say. And I really appreciate your giving us a little insight into that. Really interesting to see. And I think especially for our law students that see that there are jobs in sports that they didn't even think existed, because you've talked a lot about a high level sort of concepts, but it flows down and you need people to execute on all of these things. So there's lots of opportunities for law students to work in sports that they don't often think about. And I think you've just peeled a couple layers of onion for that audience, and really appreciate that.
No, it's my pleasure and completely agree with you. That's why my favorite resource, at least growing up, was LinkedIn, because it's this cheat sheet where you can basically essentially stalk people that are doing all sorts of interesting things. And I remember the first time I saw like a title, for instance, like Chief Revenue Officer. I'm like, what the hell is Chief Revenue Officer? I'm 22 years old in law school. Like, what does that mean? And I think people really underutilize the resource. I don't use it for networking, really. I mean, some people do. I use it more for just, wow, this is such an interesting career path. I wonder what it took to get there. Oh, wow, that's a really cool board position. I wonder what it was. And then you can reach out and just talk to people if you're interested. Maybe they respond, maybe they don't. But I think to your point, there are so many jobs that I think lawyers can do in sports across the board, and not just with teams and leagues. There are all these adjacent organizations, whether it's Octagon or the Montag Group or Elevate or, the Sports Lawyers Association. I mean, there's just so many different pieces where I think a legal degree is so valued in the sports industry, and I think it will continue to be valued. I think it'll continue to be underrated, and if you're willing to stick it out and work really long hours and do something you're passionate about, I think you have a really good shot.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's that old saying, if you love what you do, you're never really working.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly
you're
right.
you're one of the lucky people that is a local kid who gets to work for his local team, and that's like the dream job for most people. So it exists. You got it. Proud to serve the city of Baltimore.
You're saying it like a Balmorian. I like it.
And yeah, it is a small market town, but I've seen just from coming over the last few years, over the last 15, 20 years to the area, the city has developed in a remarkable positive way. And not that it's sports, but it has one of the really terrific museums anywhere in the country. So it's a good place to go. You got a great football team, and I don't think it's going anywhere but up. You guys are going to be fighting for championships, and I think you've got. I know how loyal your fan base is. One of my friends is also a native Baltimore kid, and he's at every game. Doesn't matter what the weather is, and loves to post pictures when he gets to go on the field with his kids. So I think
Well,
you're
I
you're
appreciate you
building
saying
the
that.
right culture.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Adam. And everybody, if you're not a member of the Sports Lawyers Association, go to sportslaw.org and become a member. And you get to one of the benefits that we don't talk about often is in our organization, you have the ability to reach out to other members who, better than LinkedIn, are more likely than not, when you say you're an SLA member, going to respond. So I don't want you to fill up Adam's mailbox, but part of the organization is relationships. So I hope you all join. And Adam, thank you again for taking the time today to speak with us. Really appreciate the insight and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks.